Welcome, delegates. Sorry about the technology glitch. So my topic today is how telecom sector is playing a role in the banking sector. So if you can move to the next slide, please. So basically, I'm going to cover just a brief comparison between the two industries, the telco and the banking. I'm going to briefly touch on the lessons from each of the industries. Then I'll look at some of the key innovations over the last 3 or 4 decades in the telco sector, as well as in the banking sector. Then I'll do a brief comparison of how these two sectors they relate to each other in terms of these innovations, and then finally a conclusion and some questions and comments. Thank you. Move to the next slide, please. Okay, so basically these two industries, they quite have very similar history. If we take the telco sector, for example, when they started, the primary focus was on voice provision, on voice networks. And if you look at the banking, the primary mission initially was to deposit taking and lending. But over time, the two sectors have evolved. And in the next slide, I'll just show how the two have changed. So if you look at the telco sectors, one of the key things that they do very well as compared to the banks is that they're very agile and quick to execute. So if they think of ideas, those ideas usually they come to fruition very quickly. The telcos are very good at scaling up their innovations. So you find that the penetration of telco usually is very high. Sometimes it can go as high as 90% of the population. And finally, the telcos also are good at mass market. They've amassed a lot of experience over the years, and they're able to actually appeal to everyone to join their products and services. If we look on the other side, what the telco can learn from the banks is, banks are good with credit and risk management. Banks are also very good at compliance issues and regulatory issues. And finally, banks, they also generally also good at managing those premium customers, the high net worth customers. So the two industries, if you look at it, they've got some key strengths on either side. And also, if they are to combine themselves in terms of learning from each other, they could both benefit. So now moving on, if you can move to the next slide, is I'll just briefly touch on from where starting with the telco industries, where they started and where they are going, and I'll do a similar slide for the banks before I then do some mirroring as to how the two relate to each other. So the telcos, primarily when they started, it was an issue of just providing the voice networks. Then they moved on to the provision of data networks. Then at some point, I think there was a lot of hype about voice of IP. Later on, in the early 90s, there was the issue of the internet, and now cloud computing is trending, as well as the next technology, which is 5G. So in the next few slides, I'll then look at all these innovations by the telcos and compare them with what the banks are doing, and then we can then make conclusions. Yes. In terms of the banks, primarily when banks started, there was a lot of, obviously, the primary focus was on brick and mortar or branch banking, wherein you had to open your account at a certain branch and probably are forced to transact at that particular branch. Then as technology moved on, there was the introduction of the automated teller machines that came through. And later on, the cards and the POS machines, they became trendy. Then I think from the early 2000s, the issue of mobile and internet banking started to trend there. Then later on, the e-commerce. And where we are moving to with the banks is now on open banks, use of APIs and third-party developments. In other words, banking as a service. So this is where these two industries have been and where they are going. So the next task now is to try and then compare and see who needs each other and how the innovations in the telcos relate to the innovations in the banking. So if you move to the next slide, please. So here, I'll just briefly touch on each of the innovations. The ones underneath are the ones from the telcos, and the ones on top are the ones from the banks. So if you look at like number one, which is the when the telcos started providing faster wide area networks and metro networks. This particular innovation by the telcos was received by the banks in a way that the banks now started to see that there's no need for customers to belong to a branch. So because the network was now available and customers could now freely transact at any branch without having to be forced to go to their home branch, because whatever information was previously only available at their home branch could now be shared across the network. So this is just to illustrate how the telcos have influenced the banks. So this is the first example. If you go to number two, you look at when the telcos introduced the USSD channels, gateways, the banks then responded by developing similar products to do with mobile banking via the USSD, and this in some markets was well received, and every bank customer could actually then start using the USSD as a way to check their balance, to do basic transfers across to the other customers. So again, this particular development by the telcos was then used by the banks to create value for the customers. Moving on, I think this started somewhere in the mid 2005 or from around 2000 when telcos started being aggressive in terms of rolling out 3G and 4G base stations, and also promoting the use of the smartphones. So as much as this technology was being pushed by the telcos, banks benefited in a big way, because after all their customers were empowered, they now have smartphones and they could connect using these gadgets. Banks then started to develop a lot of projects such as mobile apps, and also things like internet banking became readily available to all their customers. So this is another innovations by telcos that the banks have taken advantage of. Finally, the telcos are slowly moving towards cloud computing and 5G. This again is something that banks in most markets are gearing towards, because cloud computing essentially it allows for smaller companies that previously could not afford data centers and other things to actually then have a digital presence. And by so doing, it also means that from a banking point of view, these particular new entrants to the digital world who also now need to monetize their their products and services online. So banks have had to come up with the e-commerce. I think some banks even have gone a step further to provide open APIs for third parties to integrate into. So essentially, what we are saying is that the telco industry have a very big influence on the banking industry. And it tends to happen that most of the innovations really starts off with the telcos before the banks adopt and use it for their customers. If you can move to the next slide. Okay, so in conclusion, innovations in the telco is always followed by adoption of the same innovation or infrastructure by the banks to harness the new capabilities for both the customers' convenience and also for the banks to increase profits. Banks, we could say banks are very good at following on the telco innovations. And although they do it in a cautious manner, but still they are very good at doing that. Then on the other side, telcos are very fast at scaling up their innovations as compared to the banks. And also telcos are very good at investment in infrastructure and also at marketing. So you find that telco innovations are adopted much faster than innovations by the banks because they are able to scale it up, and also they are able to have a big marketing budget. Then the final point is that in future we expect really that this trend is likely to continue. So banks are likely to ride on the innovations and the success of the telco industries to then adopt these technologies and use them for their own customers and for their own profitability. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. That's my presentation. I'll invite comments and questions.